Well, hey everybody. On my last video, I showed you that I had the bus completely painted and I wasn't too enthused about it because, as per usual, I painted it with quite a bit of orange peel. So in this video, I'm going to show you the tools, products, and process for how I've started to make that orange peel get into a nice glossy smooth shine. And you can see I did that on a few different areas of the car. I'm completely done, but I still got a little bit more to do. But I want to cut this video now and show you my process so you guys can hopefully benefit from it. So check it out. Okay, here you can see on my prep table here, I've got a layout of the things that I'm thinking I will be using for the wet sanding and buffing. I know there's a lot of stuff here, but I'll just take you through it real quick. You'll see what I have here is I have this 6-inch DA, and I have a what do you call it? I think they call it an interference pad. So I think this is from Hercules, where it adds a little more softness, so you can go around stuff without burning it or applying too much hard pressure to it. So I would recommend getting that and adding it to your just a hook and loop 6-inch interference pad. It's about a 1/2 inch thick. Then I happen to have just a piece of this 1500 on it. I do have some of this 1000 grit paper that I could put on there, but what I'm finding is that I'll start with the 1000 grit just by hand, and what I'll do is I'll take a sheet out. I think I saw this from somebody else on YouTube, and it looks like I'm getting low here. So I'll take a sheet out and I'll cut it in half, and then I'll fold that in thirds and make it nice and tight so that I can just place it on my hand real flat and just go over it. And I'll show you that in a minute. So I think to be safe, because I've already burned a little bit with this 1000 grit, I'm just gonna, for the most part, and different parts of the car, by the way, are different. Some are more orange peely. Some of the doors are very flat and smooth already, where I can wipe it with a microfiber and it's already kind of smooth. So in those cases, I'll start with a little bit of 1500 sanding with this, but I won't go too far with it. So for most places, if it's a little heavier, I'll start with 1000 grit, hand sanding it, and then I'll move up to the 1500. These 1500 grit, again, this is hook and loop for that DA. And I'll show you my technique for how I do this. This is a variable speed DA. And by the way, there was a coupon for this. This is just a cheap Harbor Freight Bauer one. There's a coupon for this right now for $49.95. I think the regular price is $80, but I believe I got this on some special for $50. So definitely worth it, because this was instrumental in the paint sanding because it works great as a sander, but it's also, the key to this is its variable speed. So when I'm sanding, I've got this cranked all the way up to, I guess it goes up to 6 or 7. But when I start, and I'll show you the technique of how I start this off. I started off on the piece at basically on 0, and I'll start just wobbling, and then where the actual pad's not moving, it's just kind of wobbling, and then I'll turn it up to about 2 to no more than 2.5. And then it'll actually start sanding, and I'll be I'll gently just move it around, up, down, left, and right. So that's kind of the technique with this DA. But yeah, I would recommend buying a DA like this because early on in your project, because you can use it. It's very instrumental in doing sanding, but then for wet sanding, it's really good too. And it's got one other use, and I'll show you that in a minute. So once I get it down to 1500, again, I'll show you this on the car, but this is just to get the orange peel down to where it starts looking like a smoother white. Maybe there's a little sparkly in it from a little bit of that, but it's when you feel with your hand, it's nice and smooth and knocked down. You don't feel any texture. So once you get it to that point, then I go to this. Now, I actually purchased this. I was going to borrow my friend's, but I think Harbor Freight online has these for $28. And it is a piece of junk. It's this cheap Drill Master thing. It is a piece of junk, but it it will work fine for this purpose. So I thought for 30 bucks, you know, and actually I found this in a pawn shop near me. It was brand new, but it was a Harbor Freight, and they sold it to me for 30 bucks. So that's probably worth it as just a buffer. And I got this 7-inch wool pad on it. This is a 7-inch. By the way, the difference is this is a DA. It wobbles. This is just rotary. This is just for buffing. So I'll use, and what I have for buffing is these two. I have actually, well, let me just start with this one. This one is the 85, but this is the heavy cut Meguiar's, and this is what I use with this wool pad here after I'm done with the 1500 grit DA. I do have some 2000, which I'll use maybe on edges and things. I don't want to. I just want to get a little sanding on, maybe curved surfaces that I'm afraid that I might burn through. So that's what I'm going to use this for. But I'm not concerned with getting this like super great smooth, like 3000, 4000 grit. So 1500 is enough. Then the Meguiar's heavy cut on this buffer, the wool pad. Then what I'll do is I'll go back to my DA. So that's the other thing that makes this DA so nice, is it does dual duty, does sanding, but then you can use it for polishing. And so I've got this foam pad. This is another Harbor Freight thing. This is their fine foam pad, just the yellow. And they make it in different grades, but I'm just skipping right to from the wool pad to the fine. So I'll just pull this interference pad off, or I can leave it on. Pull the sandpaper on and stick this polishing pad on, and then from there we can do Meguiar's, and this is the down here. It's the Ultra Pro Polish, the 210. I don't know what these numbers mean. I don't know exactly how this Meguiar's system work, and I'm not an expert at any of this. So just take this as it is, but. Yeah, this is what I'm going to use on this foam pad after I'm done with the major buffing. And then after all of that's done, it should be shiny and smooth and feel like a real car with shiny clear coat. And what I could do then from there is just maybe take a little hand pad, and this stuff I already had on my shelf. This is just the Griot's Garage. They sell this at auto parts stores. And it's it's a polish. So I could probably put that on there as well, but I'll probably just finish it off here with one of these applicator pads. All during this process, I'm using a spray bottle with water with a tiny, tiny hint of dish soap in it. So just a spray bottle with water and dish soap, and tons of microfiber rags. I just got these out of the laundry. I use them about 2 or 3 times, then I throw them away. I got some new packages though. But yeah, in between all these processes, make sure, spray down with water, fully wipe it down, because if you accidentally have dirt or, dust or pieces of wool pad, and then you're doing the fine stuff, it kind of negates the whole thing. So between each of these processes, everything gets resprayed and wiped down with one of those microfiber towels so that it's clean for the next process. Spray it down with water real well, and what I do is I put this part of my hand, sorry, I'm one-handed here, put the meat of my hand, make sure you're not just on your fingertips, because then you'll dig your fingers in and it'll be uneven. So just put your hand on it so that the meat of your hand is on it and it's nice and flat. And I'll usually just kind of do some swirls, and then kind of just back and forth different ways, and just kind of do that. Always making sure I keep it wet, keep spraying it. So what I'll do is have if my other hand didn't have the camera in it, it would have the water bottle in it, and I would just keep spraying with that. When you're standing kind of close to these edges here, again, if you hit these edges way too hard, you will burn through the paint. So that's the place you got to be real careful. What I kind of do is I wet it down, and I For these areas now, I said that when you're on the flat panel, you definitely want to keep your hand flat on this thing so that you don't have any like finger marks. So it's you know, like your hand is like a block, or just get a flexible rubber block. That would also help. But for these type of edges, what I've been doing is getting my finger into this area here and putting my pressure right here so that I can still sand it and get, but I'm putting all the pressure of the sandpaper into this crease right here so that this isn't getting much pressure, nor is this, because I've sanded it pretty well flatly. So if that makes any sense. So yeah, getting my finger in here, just, you know, and just kind of making my fingers mold to the surface a little bit better. On like broader areas, like say down here where it's just rounded, yeah, again, I will wrap my fingers around it and kind of mold to that panel, and that will that's pretty safe. I haven't had any issues on any of these slow rounded areas. And of course on edges, you know, like say up here, and I got a lot of machine sanding, and I stop my machine like right here. A couple things I've done is get your sandpaper, you can get it like right up. Again, you want to avoid trying to get that finger there. You know, the other thing you do is if you really feel like you're going to be, you might scratch it, you can put your finger above the paper, kind of like this, and that way as you're moving, I won't do it now because it's not wet, but as you're moving, this finger, if this finger's up against it acts as like kind of like a guide to keep the paper from going up too high. I've done some more 1000 grit sanding. It's probably hard to see, but now it's pretty much everything's flat, and the sparkles, you can still see orange peel, but those sparkles in that orange peel are starting to separate a little bit more and more, but it feels flat to the touch. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the 1500 grit pad. I got my 1500 on there. Like I said, I have my nice interference pad. Make sure spray that down, spray the surface down real well. Again, make sure there's no impurities, because with the machine it's going to be even worse if you get a piece of lint or something caught up under there. You want to make sure it's already on the piece, it's already flat and set up, and you're basically just holding it there while it's wobbling, and then you just ratchet up the speed to about 2.5, and then it's going, and then, you know, then I'll make my rounds. Let me see if I can set the camera down and show you that. I'll just flick the switch to start it while I'm holding it. Notice it won't move, it'll just wobble. And then I turn it up to 2, and about 2, and then I start going. From my perspective, what I'm seeing is it's still speckled, but you can see that it's starting to open up a little bit. And I don't know if the camera it just still looks textured in the camera, but to my eyes, you can kind of see that texture flattening out and more white showing than speckles. But then, of course, down here, it's just nothing but speckles. So I've got a lot more sanding to do there. So hopefully that's kind of showing you where I'm looking at here. Again, I can't tell what the camera's picking up, but you can definitely see up here that white is opening up, and there's just the sparkles are starting to spread out, and there's less of them. Now that we've gotten this panel fairly sanded down pretty well, like I said, if you shine a light onto it and you really look at the surface, ideally you wouldn't want to see any orange peel or sparkle. You want to see that flat coat. That being said, for this, I leave a lot of sparkle in just because I'm only concerned with it being about, you know, from 4 or 5 feet away, it looking good, and you really can't see that stuff from 4 or 5 feet away. So I'm just looking to see that it's nice and smooth and we're ready to buff. Before we buff, we're going to get water and a rag, and we're going to, of course, like between every step, make sure we wipe off any residue from the sanding or anything like that off the panel, and then we'll get to the buffing. First thing I do for the buffing is I clean the wool pad. And I do that by spraying it with water. Turn it on, and I'll take a rag and just kind of give it a little bit of a clean. Again, I'm looking closely to see if there's any dust that I missed. Because any dust, will get pushed in as you're, buffing it. So then, yeah, like I said, I'm going to start with the Meguiar's rough cut. And just put a couple little, just read the bottle, but basically it says just a couple little dabs of it on, on the wheel. Then just kind of make sure it's wiped in. And I use this one's a variable speed. I usually stick it on 3. This one's a piece of junk, though, unit. It doesn't have any torque, so if you push hard on it, it'll slow way down, and sometimes I'll have to turn the speed up, or I have to feather the speed a little bit. If you have a good buffer, you won't have to do any of that. But you don't want to go way too hot on it. And this is also the time to get your edges too. I'm not as worried about the edges with the buffing, but I mean, use your common sense. Don't go too hard on the edges. But now's the time to get those kind of evened out with the buffing wheel. So you get the idea. Just hit it up and down. It'll leave some wool, and then we'll just spray it and wipe it down again and just see how it looks. What should happen is, though, what we should start seeing is finally this thing should start shining up for us, right? So once we go over a section here, it should start looking a lot glossier, right? That single stage clear should start coming out, and it should start feeling nice and glossy. I find that buffing and polishing the best part of this whole process, if there is a good part to it, because it's just a lot quicker, a lot easier, and this is when you kind of see the finished product and it starts looking really good. Anyway, same thing, just wet down. I've wet and I cleaned the surface real well to get rid of all the buffing compound and wool fragments that were left behind. And now I'm just going to wet it all down again. Wet my pad, same thing. And then I'm just going to do exactly the same thing as the buffing, but I'm just going to use the polishing compound, the Meguiar's 210. I'm using that. Again, just 4 dots on the pad, and then rub it in. Again, if it starts getting dry, just make sure. Also check to see if there's any lint or anything. It looks pretty good. But same thing, just this one, again, you don't have to be too concerned. You can go ahead and start it up if you want to. I just usually rub it in and kind of then start it up and move it to 3 or 4 is pretty good. And like I mentioned before, this is optional, but if you want to do an even finer finishing polish or wax, you can certainly do that. I'm not going to show that, but this is the difference here. And I don't know if it comes out on camera, but the difference between this panel and one that hasn't been buffed is pretty significant. It's very much, you can definitely see the clear, shiny, smooth. I mean, it feels like a a regular car now. Let me see if I can get a light on it. Yeah, so you can see with the light on it, there's still some scratches and swirls in it, so it could use some more polishing, but now you could see that there's a lot less, it's a lot smoother, there's a lot more reflection in the light, and you can see the white is a lot flatter. So this is pretty much the process I'm going to use on all the rest of the car to get this all buffed up. But yeah, this is looking good, and I think this is going to work just fine. Another cautionary tale here. Don't be like Scotty. In order to save time, I was doing some machine polishing, obviously, with that DA, and even at a 1500 or 1000 or 1500 grit, I accidentally moved it too close to the edge, and I ripped the paint down. So you can kind of see it now. It's down to primer right there. So what I'm going to do is mix up and I also have some other spots that are messed up. I'm going to take a tiny bit of paint and this little hobby brush, and I'm just going to touch that up. Well, I'll tape it off, touch it up, and then I will kind of try to wet sand and blend that back and try to fix that. There's a couple other issues where that weren't my fault, where you know, like I think one part of the gutter up here where I don't know if it was an acorn that landed on it or whatever, something landed on it, but it got a little bit dented right here. So I'm going to just kind of clean that up and touch that up with my little brush as well.
You know, over and over again I say, we don't make mistakes, we have happy accidents. So today, let's have a happy accident and see what we can make out of it.
I just eyeballed a tiny bit of paint with a tiny little splash of hardener, and I'm mixing it up in this little cap. Now we'll just touch it up with our little paintbrush here. Again, there are no mistakes in painting, just happy little accidents. Well, I let it set up for an hour or two, pulled off the tape, and you can see there's a clear line all the way around where I painted that in. Very carefully sanding with this 2000 grit just to blend in that line and make it disappear. Probably stop right there. It's pretty much hidden from a little bit away, so I'll consider that pretty much fixed.